Greetings and thank you for joining us today. This is Dave Yeske, and I'm very pleased you could join us for our latest webinar, this time with a guest speaker on the subject of cybersecurity from all angles. Our guest lecturer today is Carrie Kerskie. She's the president of Griffin Force, and she's an identity theft expert. And Carrie's focus at Griffin Force has been on providing clients with comprehensive and personalized risk assessment and reduction services, data privacy consulting, and when needed, identity theft restoration investigation. She's a key member of the Collier Identity Theft Task Force and founding director of the Identity Fraud Institute at Hodges University. She's a consultant on the topics of data privacy, identity theft, risk assessments, employee training, risk reduction, and identity restoration. Carrie is the author of the book, Your Public Identity, Because Nothing is Private Anymore. So we're very pleased to have her joining us. Let me just give you a bit of housekeeping before Carrie kicks off her presentation. You'll notice the little control panel on your screen has a chat function. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them in. And either during the presentation or at the end, we'll be sure that Carrie addresses your question. We'll also leave some time at the end for that. And we want to make sure that everything that you have, every concern that you have, every question you have on identity theft gets addressed, because this is something that we know, it dominates the headlines. It certainly dominates our minds on a day-to-day basis. It's one of the greatest threats to our financial well-being that exists out there. At Yeske Buoy, we put a lot of resources into managing that risk within the office and for our clients proactively. But we know it's something that has to be happening everywhere. Each individual has to take responsibility for managing their own cyber risk as well. So without further introduction, allow me to turn it over to Carrie. Thank you very much, Carrie.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thanks so much for having me here, and for all of you for tuning in. If I had to teach you everything you needed to know, we would be on this call for about a year. So I think what we'll do is we're just going to talk about what are some of the big trends or threats that we're seeing, give everyone some tips of how to protect themselves. So at least we'll get you started off in the right direction. So one of the first things I want to talk about here is new account fraud. So every year, the Federal Trade Commission, they come out, it's called the Consumer Sentinel Report, where basically it's a summary report of all of the complaints that they've received from the previous year, and they get information from other sources as well. Well, one of the trends that increased last year was new account fraud. It actually increased 25%. That's a big jump that we have seen from previous years. So what new account fraud is when someone uses your identity to apply for a new credit account. That could be a credit card, could be a car loan, could be a student loan, home equity loan. That's a big trend we're seeing is the bad guys are applying for these HELOC loans using your identity. So, with these type of things, like I said, we've seen a big trend, a big 25% increase in them. And all that's needed by the bad guy to do this is your name, address, date of birth, and social security number. Unfortunately, because of all the data security breaches we've had over the years, there's an influx of information available online. So odds are your information is out there and it's available for sale for $1. Good old supply and demand. Over 1 billion records have been exposed since 2005. There were 500 million exposed last year alone. So because of so much information, it's worth about $1, and the bad guys can buy everything they need to commit new account fraud right online. So how do you protect yourself? Well, the best thing you can do, put your credit on ice. Get a credit freeze. A credit freeze actually tells the credit bureaus that they are not allowed to show your credit report to any new creditors. So if an imposter tries to apply for a new loan or a new credit card, that creditor is not going to receive the credit report. Well, if they can't see the credit report, they can't make a financial decision. Therefore, they don't open the account. So it is your best defense for new account fraud. And a credit freeze, once you establish it, it's permanent until you do a temporary lift, where you can lift it for however many days to allow the report to go out to whom you need it to go out to, or until you remove it or thaw it, and that's a permanent thaw. But once you place it, it stays there until you change it. The good news is, as of September 21st of last year, there was an amendment to the federal regulation, the FCRA, which mandated the process of placing a credit freeze on your credit report is now free. It's free for life. The credit bureaus are not allowed to charge you any fees associated with placing, lifting, or removing a credit freeze. So it's a great tool to use, and it's absolutely free. And it has no impact on your current credit account. So if you have a HELOC or if you have credit cards, you can still use those. It has no negative impact on your current accounts. It just prevents new credit accounts from being opened, and that's to prevent the bad guys from doing it. A side note that I want to make, too, is if you are a parent or a guardian of a minor, it's a great idea to go ahead and freeze the minor's credit report. That has to be done by mail because you have to show proof of being the parent or the guardian, but that is an option. So just wanted to make sure that we discussed that. So how do you establish a credit freeze? Well, you have to contact each credit bureau directly. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the big three credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, but there's two more that nobody ever tells you about that are becoming more and more important. One is Innovis. This is a newer credit bureau, but it's becoming more and more robust, so that's why we recommend you freeze that one. The NCTUE, that's the National Consumer Telecom Utilities Exchange. This was created by the utilities industry because utilities industry are creditors. Anytime you use their service, you use the service and then you pay. So it's a credit transaction. So when you open an account, they have to pull a credit report. Well, they were spending a lot of money with the big three bureaus buying these reports, and they finally said, why don't we create our own database? So that's what the NCTUE is. And if you don't freeze the NCTUE report, you run the risk of having a utilities account, primarily a mobile phone account, opened by a bad guy. So that's why you want to make sure that you contact each of these bureaus directly to go ahead and put the freeze. And again, once it's established, it's on there permanently unless you do a temporary lift. Now, how do you do the temporary lift? Well, when you set it up, you're going to have a PIN number, and that PIN number is what you will use when you do the temporary lift. So when you create your credit freeze, make sure you write down and document that PIN number and put it in a secure location so that you have it when it is needed. Before I move on to two-factor authentication, one more thing that I want to mention about with the credit freeze is some of the credit bureaus are now enabling or allowing you to set up an online account with them where you'll create a username and password. So TransUnion and Equifax, when you go to set up your credit freeze, they allow you to set up the online account with them. So when you have to do the temporary lift, you just log into your account and put in the number of days you want it to be lifted, enter the PIN number, and you're done. The process really only takes a couple of minutes. As a matter of fact, before I got on this webinar, I had a client where we managed the freeze for him, and he needed to have it lifted because he's in the process of doing something credit-related. And so it took me about 10 minutes, and I contacted all three bureaus on his behalf. And we lifted the freeze for him, so now he can get his the credit that he needs. So it really is not a difficult thing to manage. The next thing I want to talk about is two-factor authentication, or you've seen it as 2FA. Two-factor authentication, it's an extra layer of security, and I highly recommend that if any organization, online accounts, if they offer this, that you go ahead and initiate it. It's a great way to help protect your accounts from a bad guy getting into them. And the way it works is that when you log into your account with a username and password, if you have two-factor authentication set up, then the organization is going to send you a code that has to be entered along with the password in order to open the account. The code can be sent to you by either email or by text message. Now, some organizations, they specify one or the other. Other ones give you the option. Well, in the past, we used to tell people to go ahead and set it up for two-factor authentication by text message, meaning you get the code via text message. Well, unfortunately, the bad guys have come up with a workaround. So the getting it by text message is not the best option. We're actually telling everyone now to get it by email. And the reason being is because of SIM swapping. So if you look at the screen, that little tiny chip that's there, that little tiny like little card that goes into your phone, it goes into the little bracket and then it gets inserted into your phone. That's what makes your phone work. That is the chip that receives the signal, so that way you can make and receive phone calls and text messages. You can access the internet. Your entire account is tied to that SIM card. What the bad guys are doing is they will call your mobile phone company. They will pretend to be you. They will say you bought a new phone and you have a new SIM card, because every SIM card has an ID number on it. They will give them the SIM card ID number and ask that your service be transferred to the new SIM card. Now, all they need to do this is to pass the ID verifying questions, which is name, address, date of birth, and social, which we already discussed. Bad guys go online and buy it for $1. So now that your mobile service is tied to the SIM card and the bad guy's phone, the bad guy is the one who's going to be getting all your phone calls and is going to be receiving all your text messages. So if the bad guy wants to take over your bank accounts or any other sensitive accounts, they simply initiate a password reset. And many organizations, not all, but many of them now, when you do a password reset, it'll text a code to your cell phone. Well, that code, instead of going to your cell phone, is now going to the bad guy's cell phone because he has your phone service. So this is why we recommend, until we can find a solution to stop SIM swapping, is to have the two-factor authentication code be sent to you by email as opposed to receiving it via text message. Because when the service gets transferred from one SIM card to another, emails don't automatically transfer over. When you buy a new phone, you have to go in and set up your email account on the phone. It does not automatically transfer with the SIM card. The only thing that will transfer with the SIM card are calls and text messages. So the bad guy can make outgoing calls with your phone number, he can receive your incoming calls, and he can send text and receive text using your phone number. So again, if you're going to use a two-factor authentication, if you have the option, ask to receive it by email as opposed to text message. Just make sure the password on your email account is not the password that you created 20 years ago when you set up your email account. It should have a new password on it, and it should be longer. And we'll talk about passwords in a few minutes. Other things that you can do to try to help prevent or reduce the risk of SIM swapping: contact your mobile phone carrier and ask if there's additional security you can put on your account. It could be maybe you create a PIN number, but just don't use a PIN number that is associated with you, such as date of birth, year of birth, anniversary, 4 digits of your street address, last 4 digits of your phone number. You know, we all are creatures of habit, and we go for the easiest path, things we can remember, so we choose PIN numbers based on something familiar to us. Well, that's a mistake because the bad guys can figure those out. So make sure it's a random number. Another option would be security question answers. When you answer a security question the first time, whatever answer you give becomes the official answer. So what we recommend is don't answer the question with your real answers. Use what we call a one-off. So have someone you know, use that person as your answer key. So if you're going to choose your best friend, when they ask what is the name of your oldest nephew, well, it wouldn't be your oldest nephew, it would be your best friend's oldest nephew. So it's enough to where you'll be able to remember the answers, because all you have to remember is who's your answer key. But it's enough of a variation to where the bad guys are not going to easily figure it out. Another thing you can do is make sure you set up online access to your mobile phone account. Every mobile phone carrier allows you to set up online access. If you're not setting it up, you leave it wide open for a bad guy to set up the account on your behalf, because typically all they need is name, address, date of birth, social, and your mobile phone number, which pretty much are public record now. So set up that online account. So if there are any changes, or if somebody tries to make changes on your account, like change your password or get in, you'll receive an email, you'll get notified. Now, a way you can tell if you have been SIM swapped is your phone will say no service. Now, if you see that, don't panic. It could be you're in an area with very low service, or maybe they're just having an issue. So usually what I recommend and what I do is if I see no service, and if it's in an area where I know I usually have service, I'll power down my phone and do a reset and then power it back up again. And usually that fixes it. If it still says no service, then I use another phone, another device, or I go online and I contact my mobile phone company and ask if there are any issues. And that way they can look up the account. And if you have been SIM swapped, they'll say, well, yes, because we transferred your service to the new SIM. And that's how you can find out that it's now happened. So again, the solution for two-factor authentication, receive the code via email as opposed to text. If you don't have the option, then you have to go with text messaging. Just, make sure or look for any warning signs that you might have been SIM swapped and try to set up the extra security on your mobile phone account. Okay, passwords. This is a big question that I get all the time from people is, what about passwords? So the old way of thinking with passwords is that it needed to be 8 to 12 characters in length, and you needed to use letters, numbers, and symbols. And you had to change it every 90 days. Those were recommendations by NIST. It's a national organization that gives security recommendations for various industries. Well, about a year or 2 years ago, they came out and said, yeah, we messed up. We made a mistake. It was really bad advice, so now we know the correct way to manage this. So the new thinking is a password should be a minimum of 12 characters. Longer is better. They found out it's all based on the amount of time it takes to figure out a password. And it's not a bad guy sitting there typing in the numbers himself. It's a computer program, a software program that's running and trying to figure out all the combinations. Well, if you have anything less than 12 characters, that can be broken within a few minutes to maybe an hour. Once you hit 12 characters, that increases the amount of time it takes to figure out that password. It increases it from hours to days, weeks, months, and even years. So longer is better. So you're thinking, great, now I have to take my password and add about 10 different ones to the end of it. No, you don't want to do that. So instead of thinking of it as a password, think of it as a passphrase. Use a sentence. Use a line from your favorite movie or book or song or poem. So don't think of it as a word. Think of it as a phrase. Longer is better. Now, as far as the length of it, it may be mandated, the maximum amount of characters and the type of characters by whatever website you're using. So they may still say you can only do up to 12 characters. So what you want to do is default to the maximum amount of characters that are permitted. Because these recommendations just came out recently, some websites are still trying to go in and update. So if you have the opportunity to do 14 or more, absolutely go ahead and do it. And again, think of it as a passphrase as opposed to a password. Another thing is the frequency. They used to say change it every 90 days. Well, they figured out that when you have to change it every 90 days, people don't put a lot of time and energy into creating a real strong password because they know they're just going to have to change it in 90 days. So people were having password fatigue. They were using really crappy passwords. So they would just pick a word and throw a couple numbers and symbols at the end of it. Those are real easy for bad guys to figure out. So that's why NIST has now come out and said once a year is fine. If you're using a stronger, longer, tougher password, changing it once a year is fine. So do it on your birthday. I know that's something everyone's looking forward to do on their birthday, is to spend their birthday changing their 100, 200 passwords for all their accounts that they have. It doesn't have to be on your birthday. Just make a note in your calendar once a year to go in and change your passwords. Now, the next thing you might think of is, great, now I have all these passwords. Where the heck am I supposed to keep them? Because you can't remember these 12, 14, 20 character passwords. So let's look at all the options. First one, pen and paper. There's really no problem with using pen and paper or pencil and paper as long as you keep it locked up. Now, that doesn't mean to put it underneath your mouse pad, underneath your keyboard, on the drawer where you sit at your desk, or, on a sticky note on the monitor or around the computer. no, those are the first places the bad guys are going to look. As a matter of fact, when I was at a client's house last week, we were helping them with some issues, and he needed his password for one of his accounts, and he flipped over his keyboard, and it was right underneath his keyboard, and I just kind of chuckled because he'd heard me say, don't store it there, so he was embarrassed when he knew that we knew that's where his passwords were. So don't do that. Put it in a locked file cabinet, or hide it somewhere where nobody's going to be able to find it. Just don't hide it so well that you can't find it yourself. I've done that to myself multiple times. So just have a good hiding place for it. Another good reason about pen and paper, pencil and paper, is if something should happen to you, people will still be able to get access to your accounts. When I say people, these are people that you trust. We're starting to see a big trend because of all the extra security being added to accounts. Is usually in a family, there's one family member who manages all the online accounts. Well, if something should happen to that family member, maybe they're involved in a car accident, or maybe they have a stroke, or maybe they're going through early signs of dementia, and for some reason they can't remember the passwords, or they can't remember where they put them or where they stored them. Now it's very difficult for the rest of the family to try to continue with paying the bills and managing the accounts because they can't get access to anything. So we recommend that there be at least one person that you know and trust, and you don't have to give them your password list, but just have something in writing or let them know, hey, if something should happen to me, here's where you can get access to my passwords, or here's where you can get access so somebody, whoever you appoint, can manage your online accounts. There's even a legal document that some trust and estate attorneys are drafting up. I forget the official name for it, but basically you appoint someone to be the executor of your digital assets. That's all of your online accounts. Do you have to go that formal? I don't know, but at least make sure that there's one person who knows how to get access to your accounts in the event something should happen. So let's talk about a computer document. If you don't want to do pencil and paper, if you want to make it a little more, one up from there, you could use a document, something like a Word document, Excel spreadsheet. Not my preferred method because there are some risks involved in it. But a couple things you can do to try to help protect the account would be, first of all, don't call the file my passwords. Because if your computer gets compromised, a bad guy's going to just use a simple word search. He's going to type in password, and if your passwords are stored in a file called My Passwords, you just let him right to it. So make sure you call it something random. You can call it Crazy Cat Video or Grandma's Cookie Recipe or whatever you want to call it, but just don't call it My Passwords. And then the file itself, you need to make sure that it's protected. So if someone gets into your device, they can't get to your passwords. So you have two options. Either you can just password protect it, or you can encrypt it. There is a difference. Now, sometimes a password is a decryption key, which is why people sometimes think that they're one and the same. But let me do a simple explanation. So with the password, let's picture that we are all at a museum, and there's art hanging on the walls. And the art signifies your passwords. So at the end of the day, they close the museum, they lock the front door. That would be like putting a password on the museum. Well, a bad guy breaks in through a window, and he gets into the room, and he can see all the artwork. That means he breaks into the file, and he can see all your passwords. That's what a password protected means, is that even if the file gets compromised, they can still read the document or read what's in it. Encryption takes it a step up. So same example, it's a museum, the art on the wall is your password. You lock the museum at the end of the night, and they put a password which encrypts the document, so it activates the encryption. So now if the bad guy comes in through the window, and when he walks into the room, he'll see stuff hanging on the walls, but he can't tell that it's art. He doesn't know what it is. That's because when you encrypt a document or encrypt in file, it scrambles the characters, so it's gobbledygook. It's nonsense. They don't understand what it means. The only way the characters get put back into the proper order so someone can read it or understand it is with the decryption key. So you'd have to enter the password to deactivate the encryption. And I hope that makes sense. If not, ask a question and we'll try to explain that a little more. So if you're going to use a document on your computer, I recommend it be an encrypted document. And if you're not sure how to do that, there are all types of online videos and tutorials and training sessions that can show you how to do it depending on what program you're using.
Carrie, I have a question. This is Dave. I have a question.
Yes.
So if I have a spreadsheet that has passwords in it and I password protect that spreadsheet, Excel does not encrypt the spreadsheet when I do that, does it?
No. Nope, it just password protects it. So if a bad guy is able to force his way through and open the document, they're going to get your passwords. So you would want to encrypt that file. That way it would scramble it. Now, there may be some programs out there that when you do a password, it might put an encryption on it, but you need to verify first, depending on which program you're using. So that's where you could go to the internet and just say, does a password encrypt an Excel document using whatever, version of Excel you're using? But from the best I understand, it doesn't automatically encrypt it. I think that's an extra layer you have to do.
So since we're still on passwords and I've got your attention, there was a question from one of our attendees about passphrases. Do blank spaces in a passphrase count towards the 12 characters?
They could, but I don't recommend blank spaces because not every organization accepts a blank space. You're better off making sure that you use characters. I mean, sometimes a blank space could be, it just depends on how the program's set up. But from my understanding, most of them, they do not accept a blank space.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So another option that you can do, if you want to get away from having it be on a computer, on a piece of paper, but you want to have it so it's a little more mobile and you can take it with you, you can buy one of these USB thumb drives. It's just a little portable memory stick that you can pop in the USB in the side of the computer and it opens up and you have your files and everything on there. You can use one of those because you can carry it in your purse. Actually, one of our clients, he travels internationally. And the countries he has to go to, they have to have, executive protection because there are some countries you just should not be going to right now. So when he travels, he actually wears a lanyard, a thing. He wears his USB thumb drive around his neck. So if somebody steals his laptop or steals his phone or steals something else, he still has everything on that USB thumb drive around his neck. Now, if you're going to do that, make sure it's an encrypted thumb drive. You can buy them pretty much anywhere now. I mean, last year I bought a 3 or 4 pack of encrypted USB drives from Costco, and I think it was like $40 or less. So you can buy them that already have the programs on it, the encryption program on it. So when you first set it up, first time you plug it in, it's going to pop up and it's going to say, create a password. Well, that password becomes your decryption key. So just make sure you keep track of that password so you can get into it. And then you can just carry it around with you. So if it gets lost or stolen, nobody's going to be able to get your passwords off of it because they're not going to have your master password or the decryption key. I would recommend, just like with anything else, like we were all told growing up, don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you're going to use any of these methods, you need to have a backup. You can't just depend on one method working. If you have pencil and paper, well, what happens if there's a fire or a flood? Now you've lost everything. Computer document, if your computer goes on the fritz and it fries. USB thumb drive, they don't last forever. So make sure that you have a backup password managers. If the company you're using, if they have an issue or if their servers go down, always have a backup. If you have it in technology, have the backup be paper, vice versa. Or if you're using a USB thumb drive, put the information and copy it onto 2 or 3 of them. One you carry, one you keep in a secure place in the house, and maybe one you put in a lockbox. So there's different ways you can do it. But make sure you have them backed up in a couple of places because if that master one goes down, you're out of luck. Another option is password managers. There's tons of them out there. There aren't any that I personally endorse because they all change, but there's tons of them. Just for example, like LastPass, 1Password, there's tons of them out there that you can use. If you want to use one of these password managers, and a password manager is the convenience factor, so you can access your passwords from anywhere in the world off of any device, so you're not stuck to it being at home or being on a certain computer. And with this, you just have one password to remember to get into it, and then all your passwords are stored. And then if you need to use it on a website, sometimes it'll autofill, or you just copy and paste it and put it in, and then you can log in. So the convenience factor is high on these, and that's why a lot of people like to use them. If you're going to use one, there are two things you need to look for. First one is encryption at rest. So when you are storing your passwords on their server, make sure that your bucket or your container on that server with all your passwords in it is encrypted. So if their server gets compromised and they get into your bucket, they can't see your passwords because they're scrambled. And then also encryption in transit. So the weakest link of anything online is from point A to point B. It's when it's in transmission. That's when it can easily be intercepted. So if you have encryption in transit, that means that while it's going from your computer to their server or their server to your computer, it's encrypted. So if somebody tries to intercept that signal, they can get something out of it, but they're not going to make sense of it. They're not going to understand it because it's all been scrambled. So if you want to use a password manager, make sure you look for encryption at rest and encryption at transit. And again, if you're going to use one of these password managers, make sure there is a trusted family member or someone that you tell them if something should happen to me in my file cabinet under this file, is the master password to get into my password manager, or just tell somebody to know who to contact or who to get to it, because we've seen things happen and things can happen quickly, and the next thing you know, you can't remember that password or your family member can't remember it, and now you're locked out of everything. So it's good to have a backup plan. Okay, so online accounts. You've heard me talk a lot about, accessing and setting up your online accounts. Some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, I don't do anything online because that makes me at risk of being hacked and becoming a victim. Well, the opposite is now true. We started seeing this trend about 4 or 5 years ago, that if you are not online, meaning if you're not participating online, you have a greater risk of becoming a victim. The reason being is because you leave your identity wide open for someone else to be you online. So, for example, when we first started seeing this happen, and I think it was 2013 or 2014, the Social Security Administration launched a program called MySSA, which means anyone over the age of 18 can set up an online account with the Social Security Administration. Now, if you're at or near retirement age, you can set up the online account. So if you want to apply for benefits, you do it all right online. If you're already receiving benefits, you can manage where those payments go. You can, verify your payments. You can get your end of the year summaries. If you're not near retirement age, the document that they used to send out was the earned income summary, and it would show based on your earnings, this is the approximate amount of benefits you may receive at whatever appropriate age. They're not mailing those out. Everything's going to be online. Well, what we noticed, and I always make myself a guinea pig when this stuff comes out, because I'm the type where I like to break it so that way I know how to fix it and we can help others. So when this first came out, I saw a little tiny article about it, so I set up my account. It was so easy to set up an account. I knew this was going to be trouble. And sure enough, within a matter of months, we started getting calls from people saying someone set up my online account and stole my benefits. Either they went in and changed where the deposit was being made, or if someone was waiting until they turned 70, the bad guy would apply for benefits at age 65 on your behalf. So when you turned 70 and you called Social Security, you find out that they've already been paying you for 5 years, just not to you. They've been paying to your imposter. So what we started telling people to do is set up your online account. Basically, it's you're planting your flag or marking your territory. Every financial institution, utilities, pretty much every organization you do business with now offers some form of an online account. And if you're not setting it up, it sits there and it waits for someone who's pretending to be you to set up that online account. Now, Social Security, they did create a way to block that. It's called opting out of electronic access. So if you know you're not going to be doing anything online with them, you don't even have an email address, you can contact Social Security and tell them you want to opt out of electronic access. If you do that, however, if you want to make any changes or if you have any questions, you will have to deal with a human. So that means you may have to go to their office in person. That's the only drawback by doing the opt-out of electronic access. But for all the other type of accounts, they don't really have a deactivation feature. So it just sits there. So what I would recommend is if you know if you don't even own a computer, or if you don't have an email address, or if you're not comfortable with online access, reach out to your organizations you deal with and ask them what can they do. You could try adding extra security, such as a PIN number or a security question answer, like we mentioned before. So if a bad guy tries to call in and set up the account, they're not going to be able to answer all the questions to be able to do it. So there are some workarounds. If you do participate in online, go ahead and set up these accounts. Another benefit by setting up the online accounts is that many organizations offer tools to help you monitor for fraud. So many financial institutions, they allow you to create free alerts. So, for example, you can create an alert that will notify you if the balance in your account drops below a certain dollar amount, or if there's a transaction for a dollar amount or larger. If you know how much you normally spend, if there's a large purchase that should go through, you'll get notified, and you can get notified by email or text message. Again, go for the email one right now is what we recommend. But you can use these tools to help you monitor for fraud. So definitely set up those online accounts. I'm not telling you have to use them. If you just want to set up the account just so you're blocking it and marking your territory, fine, then just set it up. But if you do choose to use it, there are great tools that you can use to help you monitor for any type of fraud. Because when it comes to fraud, especially bank accounts, credit cards, the earlier you detect it and report it, the less liability you're going to have, and the faster you're going to be made whole. So you want to try and detect this stuff as soon as possible. Because if you wait to get your paper statement in the mail 30 days later, by that time your account could be wiped out. And then when you contact the financial institution, by law, they can take up to 90 days to put the money back. So you want to make sure you're on top of it. For all of my accounts, for all my personal, even through business. I have the app on my phone, I have online access, and every morning when I wake up, I check my accounts, and every night before I go to bed, I check my account to make sure all the transactions in there are mine. So it's a good habit to kind of get into, because again, the earlier you detect it, the faster you're going to recover from it. So some travel tips, because we're coming up around Easter holiday this weekend, and being down here in Florida, this is the time of year where all of our winter residents start getting ready to head back up north. So I thought bringing some travel tips would be good for you. Some things that we see that often people end up getting into trouble is the first one, public Wi-Fi. Do not use public Wi-Fi. In the past we used to say use it, but use it with a VPN. Now it's just don't even use it. It's because the bad guys are cloning the Wi-Fi network, so you don't know if you're on the legitimate one or on the malicious one. You can't tell by looking at them. So just don't even chance it. Don't even use public Wi-Fi. If you're traveling, use the data plan that's on your phone. Or you can turn your phone into a hotspot where you can connect your laptop or your tablet. Or you can contact your mobile phone company and you can buy, it's called a hotspot. And it's just a little device that becomes your own personal Wi-Fi network. And the only people who can get on that network are the ones who have your password code to get onto it. So it's just like using your Wi-Fi at home on your home network, except for this is a portable one that you can take anywhere you go. So I definitely recommend, getting one of those or using the data plan that's on your phone or tablet or laptop, whatever you might have. And again, the airports are notorious for these malicious ones. We just helped a woman a couple months ago where she was getting ready to travel internationally for vacation, and she got on the Miami International Airport Wi-Fi, or she thought it was their Wi-Fi. She got on it for 10 minutes, and by the time her plane landed in Morocco, the bad guys had taken over all of her email accounts for personal and business, all of her bank accounts, brokerage accounts, They had taken all of her text messaging. By the time her plane landed back home after vacation, they had taken well north of 6 figures out of her accounts, and she was still locked out of everything. So it took a while. We were able to help her get everything resolved, but it did take some time because she was out of the country, and it was hard to try and manage it when she was gone. But all because she got on the airport Wi-Fi for 10 minutes. So that 10 minutes made a big difference. So just don't even use public Wi-Fi. Airports, hotels, coffee shops, libraries, public arenas, just don't even do it. Use your data plan. Another thing is juice jacking. And again, they have some weird terminology for these things. I don't know who comes up with the names. But juice jacking, just think of it as juice, meaning power for a device. So when you're plugging your laptop in, or you're plugging your, especially your phones, because the phones now, a lot of them, the plugs, it's not the traditional, 3-prong that you plug into an outlet in the wall. It's a USB that goes into like a cube that then goes into the wall. So if you go to airports, you go to malls, you go to, usually places where people congregate, they have what are called charging stations. So all you have to have is your USB cord that plugs into your device, and then the USB plug, you plug it in at this charging station, you can charge your device. Well, what we're finding out is that bad guys will remove the plate off the charging station, and they will insert a little chip attached to the USB port inside the charging station. So the minute you plug in, it's either putting stuff on your device or it's taking data off of your device. So just don't even use those charging stations. If you're traveling, take that cube with you and plug into an electrical outlet against the wall, not into just the USB, port for charging. Another thing is one of our partners, he's an IT specialist, and he does a lot for commercial and also individuals. And he was at a restaurant, and the restaurant offered charging. It was like a little docking booth where it had little lockers in it. So while you're eating dinner, you could, pay, I don't know what the fee was, say $5. You pay $5, you put your phone in, and you open up this little, locker, and it has a thing where you can plug your phone into, and then you just close it and lock it up, and then you go have your dinner and your phone charges while you're at dinner. Sounds great. It's convenient. Got to watch out for that. Convenience and privacy don't live in the same space. Well, what he found interesting is the day that he was there, they were working on the machine. So they had the front door opened. He said there were so many wires involved in this machine that it was doing a lot more than just charging devices. So because you can't see it, feel it, touch it, you don't know what's happening on the back end. Just avoid these. Take your power plug or get yourself a backup. You can buy like the power sticks or the power blocks where you can have your own, backup charger. But just don't plug into your USB to any USB port that's unknown, because you could end up doing more harm. The other thing is rental cars. People use rental cars all the time when they're traveling, but many states, they do have hands-free laws, meaning you're not allowed to have your mobile device, your cell phone in your hand when you're driving, or you can get ticketed. So it's a hand-free state. So a lot of people, as soon as they get to the airport, they get in their rental car, they automatically sync their phone to the car, so that way they can use the navigation, and they can take calls, they can make calls, everything while they're driving. Well, what's happening is that when you sync your phone to that vehicle, all of your contacts are going into that vehicle. Well, what happens when you turn that car back in at the airport at the end of your trip? All those contacts are still in that vehicle. An example, last fall, my daughter and I went up north to visit my parents, and my daughter's a teenager, so of course, as soon as we get in the rental car, she's ready to connect because she wants to listen to her music, and I kept telling her, no, I don't want you to. Well, she wasn't able to because there were already 9 phones loaded into that system. The memory was full. It wouldn't take any more phones. And that's when she realized that this information stays in there, because she thought it was just mom nagging her again, but she actually had proof this time. So if you're going to use a rental car, and if you are going to sync your phone to the vehicle, what I recommend is before you leave that lot, make sure you have the attendant come out and show you how to remove your contacts. Usually there's a reset button, or you punch a couple of things and it'll take your contacts out of the vehicle. Have them show you before you leave, because now when you return the car, usually you just drop the keys in a bin. You don't even see a person, so then there's no one to ask. If you forget and you have the car, before you turn it back in, take out your phone, take out your tablet, do an internet search of how to remove contacts and whatever the make, model, and year of the car is. And usually there's all kinds of videos or step-by-step tutorials, and they'll show you exactly how to do it. But before that car leaves your possession, you want to make sure your contacts and everything's been removed out of there. Same thing for your personal vehicles. If you're going to be selling one or trading one in, remove the contacts before that car leaves your possession. Don't depend on the dealership to do it for you. Last year, we bought a used car. And when my husband came home with the used car, first thing I did is I went out, fired it up, looked in the contacts, and sure enough, the previous owner, all of her contacts were still in the car. When I went to the navigation section, she had programmed in the home address. And I could pretty much guarantee if I drove to her house and hit the garage door button, her garage door probably would have opened too, because the dealership did not reset anything. So before the vehicle leaves your possession, make sure that you're resetting it. And if the vehicle can store your contacts, think of everything else that you're syncing your devices to that could be storing your contacts. If you have any old phones, tablets, laptops, they all have memories. Make sure your information's out of it before you donate it or recycle it, because if not, you don't know what hands it's going to fall into. Now with buying, there's the Alexas and all these, home pods that you can use. If you get rid of it, is all your information still in it? So these are questions to ask for anything that gets connected to the internet or anything where you have to upload your information. Before you get rid of that, talk to someone and see if they can do it, or go online and look up how to reset it or reformat it or remove the information from it before it leaves your hands. Because once it's gone, you have no control over what happens to that. Another big trend that we're seeing is caller ID spoofing. Now, the picture you can see is obviously the IRS calling. That's a big one that's been going around for many, many years. A bad guy pretends to be from the IRS, says you owe money. If you don't pay right now, we're going to come arrest you. It's a big imposter scam that's been going around for a few years. Now they're actually calling and saying they're from the FBI, or they'll say they're from the Social Security office. That's the new one. And the Social Security one, they say that if you don't do whatever they demand, your Social Security number is going to be suspended. I've never heard of that, didn't even know that was an option. I mean, it's not, but, sometimes people are falling for these things and they end up paying a lot of money. So you need to be very careful, and they usually all use caller ID spoofing. So the phone number that shows up or the name that's displayed in the caller ID is the name of whoever they're pretending to be. Caller ID spoofing is very, very easy to do. With our local news channel, we were doing a segment on it, and the reporter came to our office, and while she was sitting in the office, I just did an internet search for caller ID spoofing. Tons of websites that offer the service popped up, so we just picked one of them, and they had a free trial, so we used the free trial, and I entered my cell phone number. I entered her cell phone number, and then I entered what I wanted it to show. So something like 555-1212. I hit start. I waited a minute or two. My cell phone rang, and I answered, and I waited. Her cell phone rang, and it showed 555-1212, and she answered, but she and I were talking. So that just shows how easy it is to do the caller ID spoofing. So never believe your caller ID. You might even have your own phone number call you. And when that happens, the first thing you think is, how the heck am I calling myself? So sometimes you answer it because you're like, what's going on? Well, it's a way for them to get you to actually answer that phone call. So if you get in these spam calls, robocalls, any of this kind of stuff, don't worry about writing the phone number down and calling law enforcement. And definitely do not call these people back, because the number you're calling is not the bad guy. The number you're calling, the one you saw on your caller ID, is probably an innocent bystander who has no idea their number was even being used for this. We had a woman here locally that she kept getting calls all hours of the night, and people were blaring an air horn in her ear. They were calling her all kinds of horrible things. They were threatening her, and she couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, later on, it was discovered her phone number is what was being displayed in the caller ID for a scam call that was making the rounds in the community. But people thought she was the one making the call, so they were calling her back. So if you get these, just don't pay attention to them. Don't hang up. Just hang up. Don't respond. Don't call them back. You can try blocking that number, but the number you're blocking is not the actual number that's calling in, because that's further up in the chain of command with the phone company. That's why you might block a number, and you'll still get that exact same call 4 more times, because they buy a bank of numbers to do these calls. So they're calling you from hundreds of different numbers, or spoofing hundreds of different numbers. So it makes it difficult to trace, where the call is coming from. So if you get any of these, phone calls like this, or if there's a caller ID and maybe it's a number that they'll put in an area code that's familiar to you, anything to try to get you to answer. When in doubt, just hang up or just don't answer. A lot of people now, they just stopped answering the phone because they figure, well, if somebody wants to talk to me, they'll leave me a voicemail. Now, some scams will leave you a voicemail. The IRS, the Social Security, the FBI, those do leave a voicemail. But for the rest of them, they usually don't. So it's a way to kind of screen, your phone calls if you choose to do that. But again, just don't believe your caller ID, because anybody can change it to make it say whatever they want. So while we're on the conversation of these phone scams, we used to tell people here are the scams to watch out for, but they modify them and change them so frequently that we can't keep up with telling people. So now we're telling you 3 ways to identify a scam. Every single scam in the 15 plus years that we've worked with identity theft or fraud victims, every scam has the same 3 elements, especially the phone scams: a sense of urgency. So you have to do it now. You have to do this right now. You can't call us back. You can't hang up. You have to do it right now. Second thing is consequence for not complying. You have to do this right now or you're going to be arrested. You have to do it right now or we're going to suspend your account. You have to do it right now or there's going to be fines and penalties. Okay, so those are the first 2. The third one is they demand something specific. For the phone calls, it's usually a specific form of payment, usually in the form of a gift card. Federal agencies do not accept gift cards. So if someone calls and tells you the only way you can pay them, and you have to pay them right now, and you have to go buy gift cards, hang up. It is a scam call. It is not legitimate. And you don't have to be nice to these people. They're scammers. They're not going to be nice to you. Just hang up the phone. If you get an email that's a phishing email that's a scam, it'll have the sense of urgency. It'll have the consequence for not complying. So it might be one that looks like it's from your bank, and it might say, we've detected fraudulent activity in your account. Click this link immediately or your account's going to be suspended. So all 3 elements were there. Sense of urgency, you have to do it immediately. Consequence for not complying is your account's going to be suspended. Demand something specific, you have to click this link. If you get something like that when you're in doubt, pick up the phone and call your bank. Call the number that's on your bank statement, or call the number that's on the back of your card, or go to the bank's website and use that phone number. Or if you have online access, log into your account. If there's a problem, you're going to see it when you log in. Okay, so just don't panic, because we get these things and we panic. Oh my gosh, somebody's attacking my account, or oh my gosh, they're going to suspend my account. I have to do this right now. No, you don't. Take your time, take a deep breath, put some logic behind it, verify the validity of it first, and then you can go ahead and take action. And with the phishing emails, they're now carrying over into text messages. So that's called smishing. So you'll get the text message because remember TwoFactor Authentication, they would send you a message with the code. Well, now some financial institutions, if they suspect fraud in your account, they'll send you a text message. So the bad guys are faking these text messages. There's a big one that's been making the rounds, and for some reason they chose to use Wells Fargo, because that's the big one that everybody seems to be getting. So they say, this is Wells Fargo. We've detected fraud in your account. Contact us immediately or it's going to be suspended. And they'll put a phone number in the text message. Well, the phone number is not the phone number for Wells Fargo. So you're calling the bad guys. Or they'll put a link in there and they'll tell you to click the link. Well, the link does not take you to the Wells Fargo website. It takes you to a fake one that looks very similar. So you just need to be very, very careful. So don't think the only way scams are going to come to you is the old-fashioned way, by mail or by phone or by email. It can now come through text message. They'll use any format they can to get to you. So just, again, 3 ways to identify a scam. If you see these 3 things with anything that you're dealing with, that someone's reached out and contacted you, just hang up, just delete it, just get rid of it, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a scam. So that's the end of the content that I have. I wanted to leave it open for questions, or, Dave, we can talk about some other things, but those are the biggest ones that I wanted to make sure that the attendees were able to get the information on, because those are the big ones that we get calls about. There is one more, too, I forgot to mention with the imposter call. A big one that's making the rounds is you'll get a call from someone pretending to be from Microsoft or from Apple. And they will say that there's a problem with your computer and that they need to check out your computer because they think you've been infected. And people are falling for this. And what the bad guy does is they'll direct you to a website. When you go to that website, you click the link. That link enables the bad guy to now have backdoor access to your computer. And he'll tell you, okay, now I'm in. I'm going to scan your computer and look for viruses. Well, they're doing a dog and pony show. So they're just basically putting things up on your screen on the front end, and that's what you're seeing on your monitor. You're going to see something that pops up and says, 79 viruses detected, and you're going to see something that maybe some inappropriate pornography pictures, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was on my computer, and all this stuff is to get you to get into panic mode. That's their upfront dog and pony show. Meanwhile, on the back end, they're sniffing around your computer and they're taking information out of it, or they're putting stuff in it so they can get back in later on. So then once they're done with the dog and pony show, they're going to say, oh yeah, we found all these viruses, your computer, and there was even, pornography on here, and, you don't want to have that on there. You can get in trouble. So we'll go ahead and we'll clean it up, and we'll only charge you a fee. We've seen the fees range anywhere from $150 to up to $800. So you say, well, yes, definitely. I want you to get rid of this. I want you to clean my computer. So they ask you for a credit card. Now, the new spin on it is that you'll give them the first credit card, and they'll say, oh, we're having a problem with the credit card. It could be something on our end. Do you have another credit card we can try? So now you're giving them a second credit card. They try that one. No, you know what? I think it's our merchant services. I think we're having trouble processing credit cards today. We can also do it by auto draft from your bank account. All we need is just the routing and account number. So now you're giving them your bank account information. And when they do this transaction, they're telling you, you are on a recorded line, and we just need to verify that you authorize us to charge X amount of dollars to either your credit card, bank account, or whatever it might be. And you say yes, and you do it. The reason they do that recording is later on when you realize it was a scam, when you try to report it to your bank, well, the bank needs to verify which is a fraudulent and which is a legitimate transaction. So the bank reaches out to this company, and the company plays that recording of you saying, yes, I authorize the charge. So now the bank doesn't have to reverse it because you authorized the transaction. So just be very, very careful with this one. If this has happened to you, and if you have allowed someone in your computer, make sure you talk to someone and have your computer fixed, because oftentimes they leave the back door in, so that means they can get in and take out whatever they want whenever they want. So until you get the computer checked, disconnect from the internet, because now you're cutting off any of their access. But yeah, Microsoft and Apple, they will never call you. They don't know who we are. All they know is that we buy their products, and that's it. So if you get these calls, just hang up. And remember, even if the caller ID says Microsoft or says Apple, that doesn't mean that's who's calling you. So if you get this phone call, just immediately hang up the phone. Don't even engage in conversation. Don't worry about being polite. Just hang up. Because the more you talk on the phone and the more you engage, the more they know that you're going to be an easier target. So the next person who calls you from their organization is going to be higher up in the food chain and is going to be more experienced, and they're going to catch you on one of their scams. So just don't even engage, don't even initiate conversation. Simplest thing to do is hang up. So Dave, do we have any questions?
Wow. First of all, Carrie, that's just really. This has been such a great presentation, and I guess part of the reason I know it's great is because I thought I was paranoid at the beginning, and now I'm really paranoid.
Well, good, good. I have that effect on people.
I love your line. Convenience and privacy don't live together. That's something where I guess we're all going to have to learn to live with going forward. The answer is yes. We do have some questions. So the first one is kind of I'm going to say a high-level policy question. One of our attendees is wondering if you have any insights into the policy position of the Trump administration. Is there any thought that, from a regulatory standpoint, they may choose to weaken some of these new regs that around like credit freezes being free and things like that?
I don't see them going back on that one at all. That one stemmed from the huge debacle from the Equifax data breach. In my opinion, I think the federal government should have gone after that whole industry much harder than they did. But if all they did was allow us to have free credit reports, fine. I'm happy with that one. But I do not see them reversing that one at all. No, I don't see that happening for the credit freeze.
Okay, well that's reassuring. On the subject of Wi-Fi, another of our attendees is wondering, do you recommend turning off your phone or tablet's Wi-Fi except when on your own secure Wi-Fi?
Yes, that is a great thing to do for two reasons. One is because if you have it on, it's going to be constantly searching and trying to find Wi-Fi. You want to make sure that your device is set to ask to connect to available networks. You don't want it to automatically connect. Now, if it's one that you've already trusted, like your home one, it'll automatically connect to that. That's fine. But, when you're driving down the road, I mean, we've all done it before. You stopped at a light and you look at your phone and it shows there's, the Chevy next door has a Wi-Fi and the business you're in front of and all these Wi-Fi networks show up. You want to be able to choose which ones to connect to. But if you're not even going to be using it, just turn Wi-Fi off, because if not, it's going to drain your battery. Because if your device is constantly sniffing for Wi-Fi networks to join, that's active activity. So you're going to drain your battery much faster for something you're not even using. So for mine, my Wi-Fi is always turned off unless I know I'm somewhere where I'm going to be using it. So I go into my settings and I turn it off. Apple had one of their recent updates. I don't remember if this one or the one a year ago. I don't remember. But anyways, it used to be that if you kind of did the flip up screen from the bottom and it brought up the Wi-Fi and you turned it off, that would turn it off. Well, now that only does that for 24 hours. So then the next day, it turns it back on again. So if you want to turn it off, like all the way off, you need to go into your settings and turn it off.
Oh, interesting. Well, I have now a question of my own on Wi-Fi. You were saying basically don't use any public Wi-Fi, don't use the airport Wi-Fi, don't use the coffee shop Wi-Fi, etc. I have two others I want to ask about. What about if I'm on an airplane and I'm using internet while I'm in flight? Is that one okay?
Yes and no. If you're just going to be using it because you want to watch a movie, or if you want to listen to music, or if you want to play a game while you're in the airline, then I would recommend buying a separate tablet. And if it is an Apple product, set up a separate iCloud account just for that tablet. And then just use that for all your games and movies and whatever you're doing. Because there is the chance that whoever's on that same network could be doing a man-in-the-middle attack. And you could end up getting into trouble even if it's the one when you're up in the airplane. So if the only thing you're using it for is watching movies, download the movies before you get on the plane. Or if you have to use the Wi-Fi, make it be a separate device with nothing else in it. One of our clients, her husband travels internationally and she travels with him. So when he's doing his thing, she's at the hotel and she's playing her games and doing her stuff on her tablet. So we had her buy a new a tablet and set up a new iCloud account just for that tablet, and she put all of her games on it, and that's what she uses. So that way when she travels internationally, she doesn't have to take her phone or her tablet she uses for everything else. So that way, if the gaming one gets compromised, it's only the games that are compromised.
Wow, just when I thought I couldn't get more paranoid. Plus you asked, I think you answered the part two of my question, and that was, Do you feel the same way about hotel Wi-Fi? It sounds like you do.
Yes. Now, hotel Wi-Fi, I travel a lot for speaking, so I have Hilton Honors. And with Hilton Honors, if you want to get on their Wi-Fi, you have to enter your room number, your last name, and your Hilton Honors account number. So that makes it a little bit more secure because somebody sitting in the parking lot, they're not going to be able to get on that same network because they're not going to have those three things. They could try to guess somebody's, room number and name, but they're not going to be able to get that Hilton's Honor number. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit more secure as opposed to you walk in the front door and at the lobby they have a sign that says today's password is Kermit the Frog. Now everybody knows that that's the password. So if you have to, the more hoops you have to go through to get on that network, the better it is. But again, if you don't have to use it, don't use it. But I understand sometimes you end up in a situation. So, if you're going to use it, just be very limited, but you're better off just if you travel a lot, get a hotspot and use your own hotspot.
Okay, and I have one, and I sometimes use it in hotels, but I think I'm going to maybe always use it in hotels going forward.
Yeah, it's well worth paying the extra money for the hotspot as opposed to having to pay to undo the damage from being on that being on that Wi-Fi. So, which is what our client learned, when she got back from vacation. So, yeah, again, privacy and convenience. The more you have of one, the less you have of the other.
So I have another question from our audience. One friend of mine completely avoids the use of credit cards and uses all cash all the time. This is pretty inconvenient. Do you recommend this extreme degree of credit card hygiene?
Not at all. You're protected by federal law for any fraudulent transactions on your credit cards. The credit card is the last thing you should be worrying about. Now, as long as you're monitoring your statements and as long as you're looking at them, I'm not saying just, free will and just never look at your statements because you have, by law, you have 60 days to report the fraud to your credit card company. As long as it's reported to them within that 60-day window, you have zero liability. If you report it outside of 60 days, now you're going to be the one paying for that loss. So that's why you have to monitor. We are in such an outsourced era right now where everybody wants to outsource everything. It's like nobody wants to do anything anymore. They're like, who can I pay to do that for me? You can't outsource protecting your privacy and your identity. You have to be an active participant. Nobody knows you as well as you do. Yeah, you could hire some company to try to manage your bank accounts and monitor your credit reports and monitor your stuff for you, but they're not you. They're never going to be able to monitor it as well as you can because they don't know you. So go ahead and do it yourself. You know you better than anybody else. And it's, once you get into that habit, it's much easier to do. And like I said, if you set up the online account, take advantage of the monitoring tools, the alerts that they have. So use your credit cards. And I tell people all the time, fine, steal my credit card number. I don't care. I'm protected by federal law. Now, granted, yes, I get that the credit card companies lose money. They pass fees along to all of us. I get that part of it. But in the immediate of everything that I need to worry about, my credit card is the last thing I care about because I know that I'm protected. So don't worry about that. Now, the other question people ask me is, what about credit or debit? Well, the easy explanation for that is that if you're using a credit card and it gets compromised, it's the credit card company's money that's compromised. If you're using a debit card or a credit/debit card, that's still coming out of your account. That's your money that gets compromised. Whose money would you prefer to have compromised? Yours or the credit card companies? So if you're doing anything online, if you're going to a gas station, you're out at a restaurant, use a credit card. If there is any fraud, you call the company, they take care of it, you're made whole, problem solved. It's the easiest thing to recover from.
Got it. Good advice. So I have a question about password phrases. When using a password phrase, should you still use symbols and numbers with it?
That's up to the organization that's having you create the password. What NIST said, NIST doesn't see a difference if you use letters, numbers, and symbols, or if you use all letters or all numbers or all symbols or a combination of, it doesn't matter. It's all about the length. Longer is stronger. But some organizations might mandate that you have to use a combination of whatever they require. So it depends on the company you're working with.
So still on passphrases, if I have a 30 character passphrase, but it's a line from Shakespeare, will the fact that it's a line from Shakespeare make it easier to crack, or are those 30 characters the real key?
The 30 characters is the key. Because when the bad guys are doing it, well, for example, I'm a licensed private investigator, and about 2006, I went to a national conference, and there was a speaker, and he was talking about, that's when cybersecurity stuff was really starting to kind of amp up. And he was telling us that there was a program you could buy right on the internet, not going to the dark web, just right on the internet, $35, and it was a password cracker. That was in 2006. And it was, like I said, it was less than $40. The programs now are so much more sophisticated than what that one was, now going on, 13 years ago. So they just use a computer program that sits there and runs. Well, when you look at system or mathematically or statistically, how many combinations of one password, if it's 4 characters, you only have a certain number of combinations that it could be. If you have 30 characters, then it's a huge, vast number of combinations. So that's going to take that program exponentially longer to try to figure it out, because it has to do one character at a time. So that's why longer is better. It doesn't matter what you use, just longer is better.
So, a question about ransomware. Do you have any suggestions for risk mitigation for that?
Yes. The best thing you can do is backups. For home, have a backup. You can do a backup to a cloud. You can do a backup to it's called a local device. You can buy, like they have 1, 2, or even 8 terabyte portable hard drives that you can buy. I mean, I've seen them at Costco for less than $100, and it would take you a long time to fill one of these things up. So what I do is I have 2 of those. One that I plug into the computer, and every day my stuff gets backed up to that. The second one I use, and I will do a weekly backup to that one. So that way, if one goes bad, I still have another one. But once the backup is finished, I disconnect it from my computer. Because what happens with ransomware is if you get it on your device, it goes to anything else that's connected. So if you leave your backup drive connected to your computer, it could infect your backup drive. You could try doing an encrypted backup drive. So when you buy, like we're talking about buying the USB thumb drives, you could buy a portable hard drive that has encryption on it. Just make sure you don't lose your decryption key, your password. Because if it's encrypted and meaning you don't leave it wide open or decrypt it all the time, that is a way to stop that ransomware. But, to tell you to buy this software or install this and you won't get ransomware, that doesn't exist, unfortunately. So your best defense is just to have backups, good quality backups of everything. That way, if you do get the ransomware, you don't have to pay it because you can just, restore everything and you're good to go. And the only thing you risk losing is from between when you had the last backup and when you got the ransomware. We were seeing ransomware people getting it. It's called drive-by malware. And you didn't even have to click on anything. You just went to a website and you didn't even have to click on a single thing on that website. But just being on that website alone was enough for you to get malware. Or to get ransomware. So it's very tricky. Oftentimes it comes through phishing emails. So if you get any emails that you're not expecting, and if there's a link or an attachment, and if you don't know and you can't confirm by verbal or by another form of communication that person or that organization sent it, just delete it. Do not click on that link. Do not open that attachment, because that is an easy way to get ransomware. But your best defense is just back up all your data.
So you were talking about encrypted backups. I also have a question about whether you have any recommendation for encryption software, or is it just unique to each device or operating system?
That's a good question. I personally don't have any recommendations. There was one that we used to use, years ago, but they stopped serving it or servicing it, so I don't recommend it anymore. Usually you can buy devices and it'll say on there that it offers encryption. If not, then, talk to an IT person, a good qualified IT person, and that's someone who's going to be charging more than $19.95 an hour. Any of these quick little services. And if you talk to somebody and you say you want encryption, they say, "Oh, you don't need encryption, just put a password on it." Well, that's not a good IT person. Find somebody else. There are resources you can go to online, or, if you still need help with it, just send me an email, and we'll be happy to kind of point you in the right direction of a couple of things you could use.
Great. Also had a question about websites for Innovus and NCTUE. Is it just those names with an .org put after them? Or there wouldn't be .org?
Yep. Innovus.com, and I believe it's nctue.com. But on the screen that's up here for our website at griffinforce.com, if you go and sign up for our free newsletter, as soon as you sign up and confirm, because we do a double opt-in just to make sure you want to do it, once you've signed up, then the first thing that immediately gets sent to you is a sheet that tells you exactly how to do a freeze with all the links. Everything's right in there. So you just have to click the link for each one, and it'll take you right to the page, and you just follow the instructions.
Well, gosh, this has been just fantastic. And this is, I think this is the most number of questions we've had on one of our webinars, and I'm not surprised because this is a hot topic. And you clearly know your topic, and everyone can see on the screen here, griffinforce.com is where they can find more information about you. And you should all know that we're also, when we send out a link to the recorded version of this, we're going to send you a copy of a tip sheet that Carrie has provided for your edification, and there will be more contact information there as well. So I will end by saying, thank you, Carrie. This has been incredibly edifying and also paranoia-inducing, but edifying nonetheless. And thank you all among our audience for attending and spending your time with us. There will be, as I said, a recorded version of this. You'll get a link to it, which you can share with your friends and family. And I'll look forward to seeing you again.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Great.